Sustainable data infrastructure. Clara Tsao on Filecoin's vision for AI and climate-friendly storage, Part 2. In this episode, Dr. Jemma Green continues her conversation with Clara Tsao, exploring how Filecoin is pioneering sustainable approaches to data storage in the age of AI. From solar-powered data centers to partnerships with GPU and compute networks, Clara reveals how decentralized infrastructure can address the massive energy demands of modern technology. They discuss Filecoin's role in the AI ecosystem, the importance of data verification, and how Clara's background in national security and disinformation shaped her vision for a more transparent digital future. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl, and whether you're an investor or a startup looking for insights, it's time to get unblocked.
You mentioned data centers powered by solar. I mean, it's not actually physically possible to have a data center entirely powered by solar because obviously it's only generating electricity when the sun's shining. But you could create 24/7 renewable power through a combination of, say, solar, wind, battery storage, or even renewable energy certificates to cover the period when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining. But my question about that is that something that's actually sought after, where people are looking for storage that is 100% renewable?
Yeah, so we actually have a program called Filecoin Green where we actually give, again, like I said, we are a network and we don't really tell people what to do. But if people have really great ideas that they want to have as a blueprint for others to follow by, we definitely help incentivize through the form of grants to get people to get started. So the example I was talking about earlier for a solar powered data center on our network is by a company called Decent. They're based in Amsterdam. And I'm sure they still use electricity, like you said, to some degree because it's not 24/7 sun over there, but they have majority of their energy generation powered by these solar panels. And this is the kind of model where today, if you're imagining a build out of just Amazon data centers, you wouldn't be able to even innovate to say what's a better way to build a data center that might be different. And they not only got a grant from us, but after we kickstarted that process, they also got a government grant from the Netherlands because it was so different from what they were used to seeing. And so I think that's the beauty of decentralized physical infrastructure is sometimes you can offer means to experiment in new ways that today major monopolies may not necessarily have as part of their own agenda. And I think that's something that's so exciting. We also have definitely offered grants to be able to verify outputs coming from all of our data centers at any point in time. We have dashboards that show how much every single one of our data centers that are on our network, how much they're generating. And I think sometimes this is even better reporting than what we see as ESG reports, which might be after the fact reporting as opposed to something that might be tracked in real time. So there's so many different use cases that people have done from, again, like I said, the infrastructure side, all the way to dashboard and reporting side, and then also on what are the large climate change data that today we want to make sure are coming from the right vetted sources. Because often when you're looking for information online, especially if it's a polarizing topic where some people may not believe the source of certain data sets, we do have a great company called Equity Labs that builds on top of the Filecoin network that has been looking at large amounts of climate change data and making sure that when we think about AI models to the future, they're actually pulling from the best sources out there. So many angles to it. We definitely care a lot about climate, and we have so many case studies on our Filecoin Green website. You can just search Filecoin Green and you can see a handful of examples.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. I just want to, I'm fascinated a little bit about your background and how you got to where you have, because you've been on quite a journey. So do you want to fill us in a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about my background. I think for me, ever since I was very young, I have always been very, very passionate about my why. I've always been very mission oriented in spending my life working on things that I really think move the needle in this world. And that's what really gravitated me towards not only working in startups and also large companies. Those gave me a lot of learning on how the world moves, how business deals are done, to all the way from working in the public sector. So I spent a lot of years in the civic tech community space, which mirrors a lot of, the community activism we actually see in blockchain. And there's a lot of people that really believe that technology should serve us all. And what brought me into working in the US government, and I also advised 10 Downing Street, the UK government, in setting up a similar innovation program, was this idea that today, most of the innovation we see in this world are funded by Silicon Valley or particular parts of the world that may not actually care or have that incentive to offer that technology at every single corner. And for me, being able to spend my time working on technology that everyone could access is more critical than ever. And when you imagine building a product in US government that everyone can touch or has to touch in some form, I see that as really impactful use of technology and also being able to help people access critical resources. A lot of people in the US especially fell behind when healthcare.gov was a failure back in the day. And there was a SWAT team of very smart technologists that all got together. And that same DNA of people was the people that I worked with closely when I joined the US government. And I've always felt this strong sense of public and civic service to really help as many people as possible in my lifetime. For me, the blockchain space is especially impactful because a lot of people are thinking in how we can rethink the incentive structure of how capital works in this world. A lot of whether that's Bitcoin for financial access in places like Argentina, where there might be large inflation and people can't necessarily have access to stability. And you see the rise of stable coins as well, giving people different alternatives to what traditional financial systems are. I think those are really important. The years I spent in issues around online disinformation, I was the CTO of two teams in US government, one focused on countering homegrown extremism, so specifically how terrorists are using the web to recruit and radicalize, but also around election security and foreign influence operations. So this could be around how different countries around the world might try to manipulate elections for other countries that might have more of a geopolitical outcome. Those are really hard and interesting problems where I think really understanding the architecture of the web, how people communicate on the web, that's more important than ever. And so for me, my journey has been actually very logical every step of the way. I try to find an even better way to solve a problem, and I learn and cover more. And sometimes that cross-disciplinary path to where I am today has allowed me to combine all these interests. For example, today we are storing a ton of government data sets on the Filecoin network because back to my civic tech roots, a lot of people don't realize that data that even governments release is fragile. We've seen cities, mayors, governments take down data from previous administrations or previous regimes of government because they don't want to tackle an issue that that data might expose, right? So those things are so critical for me. And coming back to the internet infrastructure level of how we can rethink storage was a natural path when I saw all kinds of content challenges when I was dealing with the thorniest issues on the web. The other part when I was working on countering foreign influence operations is you always want to be able to attribute where its source of data is coming from. In 2016, there was obviously a lot of media discussion, and the UK saw it as well, over Russia and a number of state-sponsored operations from Russia happening in other elections around the world. And that ability to say, hey, this ad actually came from a server farm in Russia was really, really important for a number of people to really realize, hey, these are not Americans on the other lines making these posts. Those kinds of things have severe outcomes to how people participate in a democratic way all around the world, to even have a functioning democracy when people are unclear about the information they can access and how they can vote. That's very, very challenging. And sometimes this information also prevents great people from even being able to be elected or run for office, because there are a lot of rabbit holes where the second you go down one information silo, everything else you're served is in that same bucket. And at the end of the day, most companies today that we see in the Web 2 version of the web are built by an incentive model where you have to be able to scrape user data in order to sustain your business. It's always an advertising play. And this is how situations like Cambridge Analytica took place, where a lot of people actually might be subtly aware of their information being used, but the large scale of how easily it was for somebody to do that and monetize off of user data and even, use it for particular research means against their will was something that a lot of people were shocked by when it actually took place. So I think these kinds of situations were ones where, for me, being able to spend my time on hard problems in this world is a very strong motive for how I've taken my career. And I hope to continue going down that direction. But that narrative has been very consistent, even though I've worked on different roles. Every single one has been a building block from the next. And even the work I did in ed tech around a decade or more ago was really beautiful during the pandemic, COVID, when kids had to remote learn. And I never thought I would see a day when there was an explosion of ed tech everywhere, because initially you have to work with school systems. There's all these regulation. And when a pandemic hits like the one we saw in 2020, it was amazing that the infrastructure for ed tech was as mature as it had been. And it wouldn't be there if there wasn't decades of people really thinking a few years in the future. And I think that's what's so great about today, the blockchain and crypto community, is sometimes it's hard to actually tangibly feel the outcome. And we've seen time over time more progression to all kinds of tooling and innovation that today everyday consumers are starting to understand more and more. I think this year, with a lot of regulatory upsides, not only in stable coins, but even, in the US, a lot of positivity in how people understand crypto from the Hill and also regulators from around the world. I think that's a big turn for people to really feel like, hey, this is something that in its core technology has a lot more good than what we might see on the news for scams or failures from, people who are essentially scammers at the end of the day.
What's the future though? Where do you see it going? Because you've seen this journey happening, and I think there's still a degree of education to go around for people to understand where the data is being stored and what they're giving away. But where's it taking us?
Yeah, I think where it's taking us is, ultimately, I'm super excited about the age of AI, because while there's a lot of challenges with job replacement or which jobs will exist and which ones won't, at the end of the day, AI is making it easier for people to find information more than ever. Today, you don't even have to be, for example, a programmer to learn how to code. You can vibe code and build an application in seconds. And so I think it's actually been equalizer more than ever, as we see AI actually augment and make it easier to do things more than ever. My big look into the future is just making sure that people are also thinking about safeguards at the same time, because with good, there also becomes bad actors that come into play. And this is why I think the best parts about crypto are really the areas of people thinking about verification and decentralization. Because when one group gets access to too much data, too much information, there will always be ways that bad actors take advantage of those systems for bad. And we've also seen over the years just significant IT failures from centralized systems, like what happened in CrowdStrike last year, or even Facebook or Instagram going down, and just the amount of people dependent today on centralized infrastructure. So I do think that the future is going to be way more secure in a more decentralized way. And you're also going to see a lot more use cases that not just take place in necessarily the DeFi side, but also in areas like critical infrastructure. When I was working in national security, I did also oversee blockchain technology and also IoT adoption. And a lot of what would be amazing if the tech was fully possible is how we can use blockchain to secure energy grids, right? There's a lot of possibility in the core tech that, if we can actually roll it out and go to market in the right way, can really have a lot of force for good for everyone. And so that's my sense is, the future is brighter than ever, but it needs to be decentralized, and more people need to understand core internet infrastructure to be able to own all their data as they're embracing the future with it.
Gemma, I'm interested in your thoughts there about the energy side of things.
Well, I think for decentralized storage where it's using like lazy assets or repurposing old assets, that is particularly interesting in terms of not creating more infrastructure for AI. I mean, if it is a lazy asset, it would still be using energy, but use less energy overall if it's a lazy asset that can be put to use using like the Filecoin ecosystem. In terms of water, I mean, avoiding building new data centers will certainly reduce the amount of water that's being consumed and also the impact on local communities. So I think these new models, like new infrastructure models, new commercial models and business models that encourage, more circular economy and repurposing of infrastructure is really interesting, because the alternative is, some of the forecasts that you've seen for the amount of energy that's needed, the amount of new data center that's needed to feed the AI beast. Some of it's unbelievable. And yeah, I think that the experimentation that's happening within the blockchain ecosystem, albeit, and I think in your case, the point you were making earlier, if I understood correctly, is that if DeFi is the biggest use case, the addressable and obtainable market for that is enormous. Whereas you have a particular service you want to provide, like humanity, as well as general services as well. And the obtainable addressable market for that looks different. And so the idea that you should be the same size as other L1s that are looking at like the financial markets as their use case is really not a fair or appropriate comparison. But in terms of like data center growth for, let's say, like the traditional means, if it just goes down that path and Web3 doesn't play a meaningful part in that, I do feel like it will be a bit of a failure. I think all these other use cases are really important and I don't want to dismiss them, but the elephant in the room is that right now. So maybe it's not Filecoin isn't the active, it's, that's not the project for you, but do you see a role for that within the Web3 ecosystem if it's not Filecoin? And what are you seeing going on around that space that you think is particularly game changing and could provide like a scalable alternative model?
Yeah, I mean, I think like actually the entire DePIN space, and it kind of got a lot of spotlight in the last year or more, is exactly actually, like you said, much more towards a future where we can think about sustainable infrastructure, right? You have the ability to not only recycle data centers, repurpose them in different ways, but also think about decentralized compute, decentralized GPUs, decentralized storage all in one stack, rather than having to build out brand new instances of that. So we have a lot of storage providers around the world that have actually gone on to also work with other DePIN projects to offer different services rather than just doing one size serves all. I would say that at the end of the day, I think it's just different comparisons. It's not saying good or bad, but if you look at the way we measure success in the network is actually if our goal is to store and offer decentralized storage, the actual Web3 market for types of data to store is actually very, very small. It's actually a tiny fraction of that. So it's not that we don't care. It's just that we have a large set of stakeholders we're always looking at. And I think the upside of us leaning into Web3 is really because a lot of people are really good early adopters that are willing to experiment and willing to try and really willing to innovate with us versus, some of the enterprise traditional infrastructure providers might be a little bit more skeptical about all kinds of newer things that hit the market, right? And I wouldn't even take it personally to Web3 that's all kinds of innovation that are in the emerging tech bucket. But actually, earlier this year, we were at the World Economic Forum at Davos, and the idea of energy and data centers was really important in this race to win the AI race, right? Like, how do we do that? For me, one of the best parts about decentralized data centers and this idea of not only storage, but compute and GPUs is it really allows that flourishing of wealth generation and job generation to touch every single part of the world, not just the few that have resources or the talent. Today, if we can offer, different entrepreneurs in across Africa to offer data centers, people get better local access to data, and they also have the chance to also build that economic pillar of opportunity. So I think there's a lot that is positive there. I think, unfortunately, there's going to be energy consumption in all forms. And I hope that at the end of the day, everyone thinks about energy generation in the bigger scheme of how it impacts everything around them, because there's future generations that have to live on this planet that have to deal with the long-term consequences of highly energy efficient ways of doing so. I do think that a lot of people today, whether it's in centralized AI or decentralized AI, are certainly thinking about more and more efficient ways to lower the energy costs, which I think is really great. But the repurposing of critical physical infrastructure, I think, is a huge part of this story.
hmm And in terms of like GPU and compute, is that something that is important for Filecoin to offer services around, or is it mainly storage?
We actually are working with a number of companies in both decentralized GPUs and compute. So Aether is a great example where we have actually announced a partnership with Aether many times to really look at how we can help deploy storage to their compute needs.
hmm
And the same thing with Akash for GPUs. We've worked with other networks that offer other kinds of compute or storage or GPU means to really offer that trifecta of services for people who have all kinds of storage needs that they want to be able to not only customize, but also do it in a fully decentralized way. So I think in the last year alone, we've done probably 10 different partnerships in the AI space, but that's all together with other DeepIn projects as well to be able to offer that entire AI stack. Because you imagine the infrastructure layer, there's storage, compute, and GPUs. And then on the training data layer, there's a handful of companies really thinking about how to have good training data sets that are also decentralized that might also help creators monetize off of their IP. And then on the very top layer, there's obviously people building the application and AI agents that are much more consumer facing. And so I think there's so much that is there that we're always constantly trying to make sure we have the best plumbing to be able to scale as we see this whole entire ecosystem of other players also get into the spotlight.
Great. And in terms of like the ratio of like storage, compute, and GPUs, how would you break that up in terms of all of your activities? You mentioned like quite a lot of partnerships that have been announced that are more focused on the AI space. Are they yet to become a really big part of the overall data storage and processing story, like in terms of volume?
Yeah, I think I said this earlier, or maybe I thought it. But by the end of 2026, 90% of new content on the web are all going to be AI generated, right? And there has to be a way to catch all of that data. And I think that AI, whether you're using it or not, is just a huge chunk of where we're going to see data go for the future. And so for us, we are.
But just to interrupt you there, you're talking about storing content that was created by AI as opposed to your storage system being used to process AI queries.
Yes. So there's the actual storage layer, right, of how you store AI data. There's also the and storing AI data can mean different forms, right? It can mean, like, at the end of the day, the content that AI is producing. It can mean storing the training data that's still stored somewhere, right? And that could
Mhm.
also mean being able to have the right infrastructure to offer the storage, compute, and GPU side. And those are all important ingredients
Of
that
course.
that I think today, rather than having to feel like you have one option down the entire stack, you see a lot of players offering that menu of optionality. And I think that's a lot better in an ecosystem like that than one where you only have one choice or the other. It's like, you choose this. Now you have to go down the entire stack this particular way.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it's kind of like the gateway as well.
Yes, exactly. So
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, I appreciate you distinguishing that for us because I hadn't really turned my mind at all to storing all the outputs of the AI data, in addition to obviously processing the things that generate the output in the first place.
yes, exactly.
Could you tell us your favorite song at the moment?
Oh my God, I have so many favorite songs. I am about to watch a Coldplay concert this weekend in Miami. So probably the song Scientist is top of my mind. I know Coldplay was in the internet spotlight recently for other means, but
I was going to say, talking about AI using things to create lots of images and content over the last few days.
oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that Astronomer actually does inference data, and they actually got the most SEO hits in their time when that scandal and that incident broke on the web with that Coldplay concert. So it's kind of fascinating to also see that spike. But yeah, definitely a lot of people have created memes from that incident. I'm sure everyone has seen that video. So
Yeah, it's a lot of marketing for Coldplay.
yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been fascinating to do a dance through like the history of the work that you'd been doing and how that led you to get involved with Filecoin. And, it's a topic that I'd say most people don't know that much about, and understanding some of the new use cases that and the services that you're offering, as well as alternatives for people. And then an ecosystem where more experimentation can happen. So they're not just having to use the cookie cutter that the bigger providers have given them, and without any room to try new ways of doing things, new commercial models, new business models as well. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on and helping our listeners to understand more about this very interesting and important, relevant topic right now.
And thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to share, and very, very also excited to hear other episodes of your podcast as well, with all the incredible guests that you have all the time. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
That's all for this episode of Unblocked. Please check out the show notes for information on Power Ledger and other contact information. We welcome your comments and feedback, and please hit subscribe wherever you are listening. This podcast was produced by Podcast Done For You. We look forward to your company next time on Unblocked.